Remaking Britain's Conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. And on to another Donald, this time Donald Tusk. Now, he, of course, is the big boss of the European Council, former Prime Minister of Poland, somebody who's generally, during the Brexit process, said, we're sorry to see you go. This is all very, very sad. But standing up this morning in Brussels in a press conference with the Irish Prime Minister, this is what Donald Tusk had to say.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
Oh, well, there's a place in hell for me, according to Donald Tusk. But not content. Not content with just attacking people like myself and Boris Johnson. No, he thought he'd have a pop at the Remainers as well.
Today, there is no political force and no effective leadership for Remain. I say this without satisfaction, but you can't argue with the facts.
So, basically, the Leavers are going to hell, the Remainers are a complete waste of space, and we hate the British, is what I took. Now, Jean-Claude Juncker, the EU Commission President, this afternoon at about 4 o'clock, looking, I have to say, somewhat dishevelled, thought he'd try and pour oil on troubled waters.
I'm less Catholic than my good friend Donald. So he strongly believes in heaven, and by opposite in hell. I believe in heaven, and I have never seen the hell apart during the time I was doing my job here. It's a hell.
Well, I just don't know what Juncker thought he was doing. I tell you what, we'll take Juncker out of the equation. But I've shown you what Tusk has said. What about this, though? What about this? Following up, Guy Verhofstadt, the leader of the Liberal group in the European Parliament, a Euro fanatic to his fingertips and somebody who really does not like the British one little bit. And he tweets out within the last half hour, just to be helpful, well, I doubt Lucifer would welcome them, as after what they did to Britain, they would even manage to divide hell. So what's going on here? What is really happening here? It is a pattern that we've seen ever since the Brexit vote. It is arrogant, rude, out of touch, Brussels bureaucrats and politicians basically being abusive about 17.4 million people. But not content with that, today it would appear that Mr Tusk has even been quite rude about the 16.8 million, or at least the leaders that voted to remain. And for Verhofstadt to double it up like that, do they not realise that we loathe being abused? We can't stand our leaders being talked down to. And least of all, actually, we feel, all of us on the Leave side, that comments like Verhofstadt are personal to us. But they're not just rude and arrogant, they're also now scared. Remember, I spoke in the European Parliament last Wednesday. That speech has now had 6.7 million views on YouTube, and you can find it on lbc.co.uk if you haven't had a chance to catch up with it. And what I said after that was, when I said you are driving British public opinion towards a WTO exit because of your behaviour, I could actually see genuinely the fear on their faces. These people are now scared. On the one hand, they think they've got Mrs May trapped, because she can't get out of the backstop, and they've made that perfectly clear. She's made a huge mistake. They like her being trapped because they think that will lead to an extension of Article 50, so they can then say to their electorates in May and the European elections, look at these silly islanders and what they did, don't make the same mistake. But something that's really worrying them is, over the course of the last few weeks, the amount of work that's been going on between our civil service and our authorities and those in Brussels has been extraordinary, particularly in the areas of financial services in terms of banking, money, securities transactions. Basically, the plans have been put in place that if there is, a no-deal WTO-style Brexit, things will carry on the 30th of March, exactly as they did on the morning of the 29th of March. And I think they're now getting scared in Brussels that we might, despite what Parliament says at the moment, they're getting scared we might leave with, as they put it, no deal. And they're scared because the pressure is now coming on them from German industry and French industry and Italian industry. And can you imagine if there's a European election And tariffs have been put on all these European products that are sold in such huge numbers in this country, and the blame of the electorate doesn't go to their own national governments, it goes to the European Commission because of their intransigence, damaging jobs in France and Italy and Germany and elsewhere. So I think they're actually really very, very scared. But whether that's right or not, I put it to you that these comments are the biggest insult we've yet had from the European Union. And I'm asking you, do you think Donald Tusk and Guy Verhofstadt have a point? If you do, call 0345 6060 973. If you're disgusted by these comments and think they should apologise, please text to 84850 and tell me, have the comments today of Tusk and Verhofstadt and the general behaviour that we've seen since the referendum changed your mind about the European Union and whether we should be a member of it? And please tweet on that using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can comment there too. I'm going to go to Anna, a new caller from Birmingham. Good evening, Anna.
Evening, Nigel.
So what did you make of those comments?
Well, I believe, yes, the language is strong, and yes, maybe he should have used the word hell, but the sentiment is very, very accurate. The EU is frustrated with the UK's position, and any person who does propose Brexit or did before the referendum or before the triggering of Article 50, who did not have a clear idea as to what would happen with the UK, they are really stupid and should be in contempt with the UK public and like anyone else. It's very, very wrong for anyone to propose such a drastic idea to this country and not have a clear idea of how to implement it correctly.
Well, I mean, you could argue, Anna, that there was no really clear impression of what would happen if we stayed in the European Union. I mean, who was to say what laws they'd pass or what direction they'd take?
Okay, that's very hypothetical, Nigel.
Well, not really, Anna. Not really.
Well, now we're in this position, Nigel, that we're out of the EU. People were promising this, that, and the other. Nothing was very clear. Nothing was very practical in many people's minds, especially the EU's minds. And they're very frustrated at this point. We're leaving the EU in 51 days, and the EU is just asking the UK to clarify its position in a practical, logical way. That's all they're asking for.
Do you think, Anna, do you think abusing leavers and leave leaders saying they'll go to hell, backing that up by saying that, you know, they're not even fit to go to hell, which is what we got for Verhofstadt, at the same time actually being quite rude about the Remain campaign? I mean, do we really want people like this to run our country, Anna?
Well, I feel like you just mischaracterized his quote. He said that he proposed Brexit without a clear idea. Like, he's not just saying any old Leave voter, you're going to hell. It's the people in charge of this country who said one thing about Brexit and cannot implement it in another. That's all he's saying. And I do not feel like he insulted Remainers. We probably could not rejoin the EU just because it's a very toxic situation politically in the UK at the moment. So I think of that as a reality, probably. But I don't think you should mischaracterize his quote by saying that all Leave voters are going to hell. I
mean, Mr Verhofstadt seems to think that hell is too good for the leaders of the Leave campaign. Do you think he's right?
I don't think hell is a place for any Leave voters. I feel like a lot of Leave voters were persuaded and manipulated, so I don't feel like they deserve hell. I don't feel like anyone
manipulated.
Deserves hell.
They were manipulated.
Yes, manipulated.
Really? Yes. God, they must be really. They must be really stupid, Anna.
By fantasies and by unicorns. I didn't say they were stupid.
Well, they must be. They must be incredibly stupid.
Anyone could be manipulated in the right way. I didn't say that they were stupid. I'm saying that they would believe in something. But they should believe in people in power, in their MPs. If they're saying something, they should have trusted their MPs to do what they have to do.
I don't trust our MPs. No, Anna, we don't trust our MPs one little bit. That's why we demanded and got a referendum. Anyway, Anna, you've got your point of view. Fine. I've got... hi, Nigel. Would you please thank Mr Tusk when you next see him? I will next week. This helps us towards a no deal. I tell you what, I'll shake his hand on Tuesday and thank him. I will take a special place in hell any day of the week than be subservient to an unelected Donald Tusk. It's high time Theresa May stood up for Britain, says Laura in Shenfield. And I agree with you. Look, you know, the idea that people like him won't be telling us what we can and can't do, will make our own decisions for good or bad, that sounds more like heaven heaven than hell, to me, I have to say. Tusk was talking about you, Nigel Farage. Well, it wasn't just me, I don't think, but I think I was probably quite high in his thoughts. I'm struggling to think of anyone who has a problem with people telling the truth about you. Well, if you think it's the truth, that's fine. I mean, I just happen to believe in independence and self-government and self-determination for the United Kingdom. I don't want to be run by Verhofstadt and Tusk and Juncker. They're arrogant, rude, they're awful. Goodness me, what is wrong with us? Why don't we think we're good enough to run ourselves? Why do we need these people telling us what to do? I'd rather have Tusk in power over here than anyone in the current government. Point is, Mr. X on Twitter, this government can be got rid of at the next election and replaced by somebody else. You can't get rid of Mr. Tusk because you didn't vote for Mr. Tusk or Mr. Barnier or Mr. Juncker, and that actually gets to the heart of this argument. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here at LBC at 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. The European Council President Donald Tusk had this to say earlier on today about leaders of the Leave campaign.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
Aren't we lucky to have friends like that making our laws and running our country? That was backed up by Guy Verhofstadt from the European Parliament, who said hell is too good for them. Before I get back to asking you whether that is the biggest insult we've had yet in this Brexit process and whether it's changed your mind on how you feel about Brexit, I must come back to Jeremy Corbyn. Last night I played you clips of him speaking in 2009 in Dublin in the second Irish referendum campaign on the Lisbon Treaty. Corbyn virulently opposed to the Irish being asked to vote again, having rejected the Lisbon Treaty and calling the European Union a 21st century empire and a Frankenstein. Some of you said, yeah, but Nigel, come on, for goodness sake. I mean, he was young then. It's ages ago. It was 2009. Well, try this that's come out today from 2012.
The Nobel Peace Prize awarding committee have a great sense of humour. How can you not give a Nobel Peace Prize to Henry Kissinger, then one to Barack Obama, who then uses the acceptance speech to call for a renewed war in Afghanistan? I mean, just have a sense of humour about it. It really doesn't matter, and the European Union has been rewarded for setting up an army and an aggressive military foreign policy. So it's obvious, don't worry about it.
There you are. Jeremy Corbyn saying there was a European army being set up with an aggressive foreign policy. Well, I have to say, Jeremy, I've been saying exactly those things. I was called a dangerous fantasist in a live LBC debate in 2014 by Nick Clegg, now Sir Nick Clegg, for daring to do so. All goes to show that Corbyn is probably more Eurosceptic than I am. He is leading the Labour Party. There are massive divisions in Labour over Brexit. We all talk about Tory divisions, they're there in Labour, but Corbyn, given how Eurosceptic he is, could play a very important role in the course of the next few weeks. I don't agree with much Jeremy Corbyn stands for, but I do know on the Brexit debate he's actually on the right side, even if he's not telling anybody at the moment. Let's get back to this insult, and it is, I think, a massive insult coming from EU politicians. It makes me even more determined for us to leave, to get out and not be governed by them. James is calling from Manchester. Good evening, James.
Good evening, Sir Nigel.
Welcome.
Thanks for taking my call. Firstly, can I just quickly say, I disagree fundamentally with your condescending last caller, who actually, if you play it back, did actually say that 17.4 million Brexiteers were stupid.
I know.
However, forget that. As for Mr. Tusk, I'm absolutely fuming. I've been listening to this debate pretty much all day today. Absolutely fuming with this man, and if he had any honour or any credibility, that man would step down. He's now trying to backtrack on the case that he was only aiming it at politicians. People like you, people like Boris. No, it wasn't. His actual statement was anyone who campaigned for Brexit. I'm an ordinary working class man, right? I'm not a politician. I am just a mere pawn. I spent 3 months campaigning for Brexit, door knocking, leaflet dropping, going to houses, going up 15 floor tower blocks, delivering leaflets. I spent 3 months for it. And what he really meant in his loaded statement was that anybody who voted for Brexit needs to be in hell. And that man should step down. And all I've seen what he's done, he's reinforced people. I've listened to people on LBC today, and some of the presenters, by the way, I won't name them, but she's female, who almost tried to justify his comments. And what my point is that if somebody like you, Nigel, very highly respected, had stood up on a podium and said, I think all Remainers should go to hell, there would have been absolute uproar.
Oh, I'd have been put up a Tower of London, James. There's no question about it.
They'd have been calling for your head, right? But this man can get away with saying it. He has insulted half the British electorate. It's almost like when you go back to when Clinton called everybody that wanted to vote for Donald Trump deplorables.
Yeah, I know.
And that is why she lost.
Well, I sense, James, that probably what Tusk and Verhofstadt have done today is to actually make a few people who voted Remain think, goodness gracious me, these people are frightful. James, thank you. Brian is calling from Amersham. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening.
So, was Tusk, do you think he was right in terms of the content of what he said? Maybe not the tone, but what about the content?
You're absolutely right. The tone was not helpful.
No.
The content of what he was saying, he does have a point. Let's start with the Leavers. There is a completely ineffective Remain leadership. And
so he's right about that, yeah?
He's right about that. And I have to say, and you're part of this problem, there is no clear plan for leaving Brexit. There has never been, and there is not at this point either. 6 weeks away from crashing out, goodness knows what's going to happen, but you can't say it's going to be good news at this point.
Brian, I want to leave.
Indeed.
I want to leave.
Yeah, I know you want to leave.
No.
But
But Brexiteers...
Tell me the plan. What is the plan to leave?
Leave the single market, leave the customs union, take back control of making our laws and controlling our borders, and for 26 years I campaigned for a genuine free trade agreement with the European Union.
To your credit, you have been very consistent on that. However, the point you were making a few moments ago was exactly the same argument the Scottish independence guys are saying about why they should leave the UK. I campaigned against Scottish independence because I believe we're better together, and I still believe the same for the UK in terms of being part of Europe. And rigmarole and chaos, which is now coming through in terms of the lack of any plan, lack of clarity, it's affecting business. I see it every day.
Isn't Brian the point?
Cannot say it's good news.
Isn't the point that Theresa May's confused all of this by trying to keep us half in and half out?
That could be the point, except that there is no consensus in Parliament or the country. It's divided. Everybody, and it's very unhelpful for business, very unhelpful for the country, and I cannot see anything but chaos emerging from whatever emerges over the course of the next few weeks and months.
Brian, would you accept the point, maybe you wouldn't, but would you accept the point that when Tusk says that, there's a special place in hell for people like me, and when...
That was unhelpful.
And when... hang on, I haven't finished yet. When Verhofstadt says hell's too good for me, do you kind of understand, Brian, why British people, particularly Leave voters, don't like being spoken to like that?
Well, I would say it was aimed very squarely at the Leave leaders, and clearly you've got a role in that. Yep. I don't believe he was talking about Leave voters. I think he's talking about Leave leaders.
No, they're just stupid.
Who did not. No, they're not stupid.
Oh, they are, Brian. They're thick.
No.
Yes, we've been told it. Maybe not by you, but we've been told again and again and again. We didn't understand what we were voting for. I hear it from Adonis.
I think many people did, but I think that the reasons and rationale why people left are now being rethought by a number of people, and that's why the contribution today by Tusk is unhelpful, because it helps polarise. It's a very polarised situation. What we need is oil and troubled waters. We don't need a match.
OK, no, Brian, thank you very much indeed. I'm not fond of Mrs May, but I do not like the EU running down an elected PM. I couldn't agree with you more. I wonder if God knows what the EU whether the EU speaks for him. Dangerous stuff, says Sarah from Aylesbury. The most disgusting comment I've ever heard. It shows the benevolent mask of our EU masters has slipped, according to Chris. Donald Tusk, he's merely hardened my resolve to leave the EU. Remaining in the EU is hell. What does Jason, a new caller from Maidstone, think? Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you so much for allowing me to actually have a voice. I tried for 2 hours to speak to your previous commentator.
Jason, you're on LBC. You're a new caller. We're listening.
Thank you very much. The first thing I have to say, Nigel, is one of my best friends is a paratrooper, and he asked me very, very seriously, do the 23,000 servicemen that died when we were liberating Paris, do they have a special place in hell when we actually were last called in to rescue these sons of bitches, from fascism? The second thing is, I have a plan, and the plan is very, very simple. I had a thing that came through my door. It outlined that I was leaving the customs union.
Yes.
I was regaining all of my rights as an Englishman, and I have a plan. It's called WTO.
Yes.
My negotiating position would have been simple. Look, I'd love to get out with a trade agreement. Here's my number. Here's my email address.
Yep.
And we'll see you on the 29th without a deal because we're going. The third point is, please give us another referendum, because I think at this point, these people are now polarising the whole country to the point where there's going to be 65% wanting out. And the final point is, if anyone believes that Corbyn, Abbott and Keir Starmer are a government that you could trust to run a kindergarten, you've got to be on another planet.
Well,
Nigel.
but Jason, Jeremy Corbyn, I've been playing his clips. He's really a Eurosceptic in disguise, isn't he?
He's a Eurosceptic, but he's also a consummate liar. That's the fact of the matter.
Well, I tell you what, Jason,
there's no getting around
that charge gets levelled at lots of political leaders. But Jason, I take your point. We did have a plan. Thank you. We wanted to leave with a trade deal, preferably. Without one, if not. And you can say that 100 times to the other side, and they keep saying, what's your plan? You never, ever seem to be able to get through to them. Tusk and Juncker are bluffers. Watch them bend under pressure. Tony, they're under pressure now. That's why they're beginning to turn very ugly. They are scared. Despite of the makeup of the UK Parliament, they've seen the shift in British public opinion. The British are beginning to say in increasing numbers, let's just leave on WTO terms. And when Article 24 is explained to them, even more of them say, let's leave on WTO 24. Let's leave the Union, have 2 years of tariff-free and quota-free to come to a more grown-up solution. And that is beginning to gain currency with the British public. And if that was to happen, they would suffer, the European Union would suffer catastrophic losses of seats in the European elections at the end of May. They are running scared, turning nasty and showing their true nature. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30 in time for the news. With Lisa Aziz. It's all Donalds today. As Donald Tusk says, there's a special place in hell for those that led the Leave campaign without the proper plan. And then, of course, Mr Verhofstadt adds to it by saying actually hell is really too good for them. But the other Donald, well, he's been quite busy. Now, Donald Trump is coming back to London. He'll be back here in December. Why? Well, this year is the 70th anniversary of NATO. There'll be a big NATO summit in London, and Trump will be here. The Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament have already announced that they will be protesting. And Trump, of course, has been insisting that NATO members pay the 2% membership fee, 2% of their GDP as a membership fee. At the moment, of the 28 members, only about 6 countries actually are. So he'll be pushing hard on that. And last night, very late our time, it was the annual State of the Union speech, delayed, of course, after the government shutdown. An interesting speech, a different Trump, I thought, watching it. I thought he was a bit less punchy and a bit more statesmanlike, perhaps, than we've seen him in the past. And the results of this speech are quite remarkable. CBS News poll found that 76% of people who watched it approved of Trump's remarks. 72% specifically approved of what he said about immigration and the borders. And even CNN, who conducted their own poll and, of course, who loathed Trump, even they had 59% had a very positive reaction to what he had to say. Not just positive, but very positive reactions. So Trump, I don't think the government shutdown did him much good, or frankly, the Democrats much good, or American politics much good, but last night's speech has really won him plaudits. Back to the other Donald. Ian on Facebook says, sadly, Tusk was partly right. The Tories had no plan at all for a Leave result. Well, that is true, and that's been a problem all along. Ian, that is part of it. But I think the real problem is that, we saw in Florence Mrs May announce she was going for a Brexit in name only, where we'd be half in and half out, and that, to me, really is the problem. Tom says, these EU politicians are just reinforcing people's resolve to leave. I've got a message that's come in from Warsaw, from Chris. Donald Tusk is 50% right. Article 50 was not fit for purpose. There was never a recipe for how the EU could be exited. The EU is making a blueprint. Tusk is arrogant, in trouble in Poland, and diplomacy has never been his strong point. Well, why in hell's name, then, is he president of the European Council when he's supposed to work together, with 28 heads of state or heads of government? I find it really odd. I'd gladly join you in hell, Nigel. I don't think Lucifer would be quite as insulting as Tusk and Verhofstadt. Doubt he would be as patronising as the Ramonas. Plus, I really object to being referred to as being stupid and ill-informed. Yes, but you didn't know what you were voting for. You must understand this. There are people out there on the Remain side who are better and cleverer than us. Martin is a new caller from Croydon. Crawley, sorry. Good evening, Martin.
Yes, hello, Nigel. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I think that last chap's comment was pretty much straight on the head, because when I voted Leave, as I did do,
yep,
I had a very clear vision in my mind of what I was voting for. There was no ambiguity whatsoever. I knew fully well we were leaving the single market, the common agricultural policy, and so on. I knew we were leaving all these institutions. There was absolutely no fuzziness in my mind whatsoever. And I think the problem that we've got now, and the reason that people like Donald Tusk feel emboldened to make such horrendous statements, is because we didn't have somebody stepping into the breach like yourself or Jacob Rees-Mogg or a dedicated leader, somebody who understood actually what we were doing from the outset. Because if we had have done on June the 17th, would have triggered Article 50, we would already be out by now, and we would already be working on the trade deals and so forth that we need to be working on. So, but because that never happened, we've ended up in this situation where Ramonas and odious people like Donald Tusk are able to make these nasty, vindictive statements. We have kind of, in a sense, brought it upon ourselves by not having a proper team at the helm after the referendum, I suppose.
But at this late minute, Martin, with 51 days to go, do you think Mrs May should now just completely change tack? I mean, she's going off tomorrow morning. She's got a meeting with Jean-Claude Juncker. She's got lunch with Guy Verhofstadt. That'll be nice, won't it? And then she's meeting Donald Tusk in the afternoon. I mean, is she frankly just wasting her time going?
Well, that depends on what she thinks she's going for. I thought it was very interesting listening to Mr. Rees-Mogg on his show the other day, saying that even he was willing to compromise. But I think if I was Mrs. May, I would be going to Brussels and I would be saying, look, it's very, very simple. We are leaving at the end of March. That's a given. That's going to happen. Whether you like it or not, we are leaving. Now, what are you going to do about that? Because...
Interestingly, Martin, one of the points that Tusk did make today is that he thought there was now no chance that Britain can stay in the EU. He thought the prospects for a second referendum had diminished so much, and that's why he was really attacking the lack of leadership in the Remain campaign. I mean, Martin, I put it to you, they are behaving as they are because they are now scared of a no deal and the electoral ramifications it'll have for them in the European elections.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure you're right, and I'm sure Donald Tusk wouldn't have the gall to make such vile, despicable statements. I mean, just think about what he said for a second. A special place in hell. Yeah. I don't know much about hell, but as I understand it, it's a pretty unpleasant place.
Yeah.
It's fiery pits of damnation and pain forevermore. That's a pretty unpleasant thing.
Yeah, well, Martin, these are pretty unpleasant people. I promise you, I've spent 20 years over there. I can get on perfectly well with people with whom I have a different point of view too. But many of these people in Brussels are a rotten lot. Martin, going to let you go. I always thought I was going to hell. Anyway, so it doesn't really matter what Donald Tusk says Paul in Bracknell. We simply voted to leave the European Union, not to leave with a deal. At the start of this process, going WTO should have been the expectation. Ollie, if we'd started off with that negotiation, they would have come running down the street after us, and we would have had a trade deal. Of that, I've got no doubt. And a suggestion here, Ali suggests here, Mrs May shouldn't even bother going to see the European Union now. After today, she should come out, make a statement and say there are no holidays, we're now going to work round the clock to leave on the 29th of March. And if she stood outside number 10 tonight and said that, you watch them come running. Yeah, and Ali, you watch the country start cheering, because I think we've really just about had enough of all of this. We've just about had enough of all the delay. We want some results. Jennifer is calling from Ealing. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Nigel. I pretty much agree with everything that's just been said. But what actually upsets me the most is that Theresa May can let herself and her country be so humiliated by these people.
I know.
And if I was her, I would actually walk away. I would tear up the agreement. I'd walk away giving them Churchill's famous sign with my head held high. Because not only are they disrespecting us, the people of this country, they're disrespecting our Queen, because she is our Queen, and also they forget, countries like Holland forget, that we saved them during the war from starvation.
I don't think the Dutch people, Jennifer, have forgotten that, let me promise you.
Well, the Dutch people haven't, but it's about time they reminded the people that are their spokespeople, and also the fact that the EU wouldn't be able to say all these things had we not and out the men that probably died in the war, they would probably have had the same feelings as we have now by wanting not to be part of all this. They are disrespecting those men that lost their lives, that actually saved them. They wouldn't be the countries they are today if it hadn't been for us.
Well, that is undoubtedly true, Jennifer, but they would argue they're building a brave new Europe so that such things could never happen again. I don't agree with them. Jennifer, thank you for your call. Now, I was waiting for this. Jeff says to me, do you remember the loudmouth MEP who derided Herman Van Rompuy? What goes around comes around. Well, Jeff, let me tell you this, matey. Right, so I had a go at Herman Van Rompuy, but who, of course, was the predecessor to Donald Tusk. I said that I thought for a man who we were told would be a global figure who would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing, that I thought he had the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And I did it in a laughy, jokey, teasing way. Have a look at Donald Tusk. We'll put the clip up now on lbc.co.uk. Have a look at Donald Tusk when he says people like me deserve a special place in hell. And look at the venom. Look at the manner in which he said it. Let's listen to him again. Come on, Donald.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
No humour, just venom. I took the mickey out of his predecessor, Herman Van Rompuy. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. I think they're bloomin' rude. People like Tusk, people like Barnier, Juncker, and in particular Guy Verhofstadt, and I think to say there should be a special place in hell for people who led the Leave campaign. Frankly, it's hugely insulting, backed up by Verhofstadt saying we're not even fit for that. I mean, are we not just wasting our time with these people and all of them saying they're not prepared to change the negotiation with Mrs May in one way at all, although I guess they have a point there because she did sign up to it in the first place. But did you notice earlier in the week that much of the media was dominated by talk of the Nissan decision up in Sunderland not to continue with their plan of producing a new car model? It was a special big SUV, diesel, and of course people streamed onto television and radio to say it was all because of Brexit, not mentioning the fact, of course, that sales of diesels have fallen very sharply. If it was because of Brexit, they'd have moved production to France or Spain, where they have other plants, but they didn't at all. But what you didn't hear about, and this is really fascinating, what you have not heard about, folks, is that Toyota last month commenced production of their new 2019 model of their Corolla. It is the best-selling car model in the world, and that plant in Derbyshire employs 3,000 people. But all you will ever hear, I'm afraid, particularly from the BBC, is negative news about Brexit and not the good things that are going on. So good news there from Toyota, and Nissan's decision, virtually nothing to do with Brexit whatsoever, but a collapse in the sale of diesel cars. Back to the European bosses, their rude comments, and do you think this is the biggest insult yet? Because I do. Dave is a new caller from Manchester. Good evening, Dave.
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, I do think it's pretty insulting what he said.
Yes.
But I do also think it shows the stress that they're all feeling.
Yes.
Because, let's be honest, they want us to get a deal that suits them. So, because they can't have Brexit to be too successful. Because if it's too successful, that's the European Union gone. Other member states will just fall out. Certainly France, Italy, they're all going to look at leaving. So I think they're feeling the stress, and well, obviously he shouldn't have said it, but I think that's his way of just
I agree with you completely. Dave, when I went to have a special meeting with Barnier, 8th of January 2017, in his office, I left after an hour or so's meeting, and the one thing that stuck in my mind is the one thing he was determined to do is not allow Britain to leave and to become competitive. To allow us to undercut them, whether it's in tax or regulation or whatever else it may be. And he thought this deal, the withdrawal agreement, was a great deal because basically, Dave, they had us trapped in the customs union pretty much forever.
Well, this is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
They want it to look like we feel as though we've got something, but they still need us to not thrive, because if we thrive,
yes,
that shows the other countries that, hang on, the European Union isn't everything it's.
Yeah, no, I agree with Dave. I agree with that, and I would go further now and say they're actually scared because they're beginning to think that the margin of defeat in the House of Commons was so simply massive. They're beginning to think maybe, just maybe, the UK could be headed for a WTO Brexit, and they then get the electoral wrath of people in Bavaria and elsewhere in Europe where they make products that are sold in this country.
And the other thing is, at the beginning of his statement, he did say, didn't he, straight away, that we're going to help get rid of a no Brexit.
Yes,
we don't want that.
Yes.
But realistically, they know that's going to happen because they don't want to back down. They need us to take a deal. But they've stuck themselves between a rock and a hard place.
It's interesting, isn't it? You're quite right.
Yeah.
It was 2 sentences before he talked about the special place in hell. He said we must avoid a no-deal Brexit at all costs. Dave, they're running scared. You've spotted it. Well done. What is your plan for Britain post-Brexit, Mr Farage? No empty phrases like we'll trade on WTO terms. What exactly are your plans? B, I wouldn't matter, B, if I answered you 1,000 times, 20,000 times. I'll try one more time. We're going to govern our own country. We're going to make our own laws. We're going to control our own borders. We're going to reduce net migration, B. We're not going to give away £39 billion as part of this ludicrous withdrawal agreement. We're going to strike out to a bigger, braver world. But most of all, B, the people that make our decisions will be able to vote for and remove. You can't get rid of Tusk. You can't get rid of Barnier. You can't get rid of Juncker. I don't know when you ask for plans what more you want. Seems to me that's a pretty good plan for the future, and it is very much what we voted for. Simon is calling from Bolton. Simon, did you feel insulted by those comments today?
Insult is not the word, Nigel. We spoke just after the referendum result, if you remember.
I do, long time ago, yeah.
You kept my call on the side. My issue is, Nigel, I was in the Coldstream Guards. I'd like to get them 2 clowns at the bottom of the Mall near Buckingham Palace and march them up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down all day, because I think it's an utter disgrace. We've got my father and mother both served in the Second World War. My grandfather served in the First World War to fight for freedoms that we enjoy today. And you've got unelected bureaucrats standing up there and basically talking down to the British electorate who voted in a referendum. I knew what I was voted for. I knew exactly what I was voting for. And I'm sick to the back teeth, Nigel, of this doom and gloom. Certain other people on this radio station, you know what I'm on about. It's constant. We've had it 2.5 years of it. Every single day it's constant. Doom, gloom, this, that and the other. Do these people think we're all sick? Well, I guess they probably do, Nigel.
Yes, Simon. They think you're very stupid. You didn't know what you were voting for. You didn't have a plan, Simon, did you?
No, I didn't have the plan, Nigel, but I've got medals on the chest to prove that I'm not sick.
I'm sure Simon, I'm sure you have. Look, I think we all hate being condescended to, and I think that whole process, that talking down to, I think today this reached pretty much an all-time low. I really, really did. Thanks for the call. Ian, a new caller from Red Hill. We haven't got long, Ian. What do you think? Was Tusk in order?
Yes, I thought Tusk was perfectly entitled to say what he said. We have been far ruder about them than they have about us, but he had a plan. He was trying to draw attention to the fact that we don't have a plan, or at least the Brexiteers don't have a proper plan. You talk about WTO.
I mean, maybe he could have just sort of wished us dead as well, Ian. Would that have been okay as well with you?
He has said a whole lot of stuff which I have heard, and it's not rude. He is friendly to this country, but he is fed up with the degree to which people have been misled in this country, because we are a laughing stock, as you referred earlier. And of course, as somebody else said, the rudest of all was you.
Oh dear, Ian, for God's sake! If I say a bloke
to be English, I have to say.
Yeah, well, you really are quite something, Ian. I have to say. If you think it's ruder to say that somebody is a scruff bag that looks like a bank clerk and not a global leader, compared to, is that ruder than saying there's a special place in hell?
Yeah, that's a rather technical point. They're not
I tell you
really
what, Ian. If that's your judgment, that's fine. We're going to just agree to disagree. I thought Tusk today wasn't just rude. I thought he was downright nasty. I thought Verhofstadt was even worse. They are running scared. Mrs May, you've got them on the run. Tell them we're leaving on WTO. They'll bite your arm off for a free trade deal, I promise you. I'll be back tomorrow at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Well, I'm just coming to terms with the fact that you and I are going to hell in a handcart.
I'll see you there.